selling hot investor topics and also talking about ADUs. It is a little bit longer of one, so I'm going to keep it to 45 minutes. So there is a chance that I have to stop it before finishing, and we can cover the more stuff on the ADUs next week if time doesn't permit today. So first, before we even got started, I wanted to give you guys some really important language to use with investors, and I put it in a Google Sheet too. But back to my presentation. So I put in the chat these just in a Google Doc, and these are really important fact terms and definitions to know as you start working with investors. This will help you speak the language of investors. So just going through it very quickly, NOI is your net operating income, and it's basically your total income at a property minus all the expenses without any consideration for debt. So if they have a mortgage on the property, it would not be included in their net operating income. And then in turn, the net operating income is most widely used in order to calculate cap rates. Cap rates are used to compare complex properties to one another, especially if they're not like kind. So if you're comparing like commercial property to a single family home, cap rate's always going to be your best way to compare those two different types of assets. And you can calculate the cap rate by taking the NOI and divide it by the purchase price. Cash flow is the net cash generated from the property. And then in turn, cash on cash return is that cash flow divided by the total cash invested. Buy box. This is a great term for you guys to start using. If you talk to investors, say, hey, Allie, what's your buy box? Your buy box is what the investment criteria they're looking for. And so if they don't know their buy box, that's a great thing for you to help them discover. That's a great exercise to be like, okay, what's the monthly cash flow you're looking for? What's the cash on cash return? What's the total purchase price? Things like that, helping them realize what type of properties, what type of neighborhoods they really like. ARV is the after repair value. That's a property has a value before and after. And then so it's your value after you make all those upgrades. And if you ever hear somebody say a zone up, that means there is a zoning area that might be one zoning like a single family zone. And a zone up would mean in the near future, it's going to change the zoning to allow more density on that lot per the allotted square feet. So zone ups are a good thing because you're like, hey, there's a single family there now, but it's about that area is going to get a zone up and it's going to be allowed to have 4 units here in the next 18 months. Zone ups are something that we're going to start seeing more and more over the next 5 to 9 years. I give that range because by 2031, California has state mandates around adding supply of units to the inventory. So that means building more units. And so you're going to see cities doing zone ups to different areas in order to allow for more homes to be built because they need to hit these quotas by 2031. And there's a lot of cities that I've seen the values of how many homes they have to add where I don't know how they're going to do it if they don't have a zone up. Like Monterey is one of them. Monterey has to add like 2,000 units by 2031. And I don't know where this possibly could go. Those are some key terms to know. Also, talking about some IRS incentives for tax incentives. So I'm just getting yours as a display. So depreciation. Does anybody here know what depreciation is? Miguel, you got me?
I believe that's when the value of property goes down.
Yeah, so it's basically it's the when you have a rental property, the IRS codes it as a business, and so they're saying the inventory of your business, which is your roof, the wood, the nails, the appliances, the paint, every single thing that makes up a home, that loses value over time. So the IRS has created an equation to say that your depreciation is your improvement value, which is the value of your property minus the land value, divided by 27.5. So each year it depreciates by that one year, by that one amount. And so you can take that as a loss on your taxes. Now, if you're not a qualified real estate professional, you can only write off that depreciation, that paper loss, against your income for that specific property. But if you are a qualified real estate professional, like all of us here are, and in order to be a qualified real estate professional, you have to work 750 hours in real estate per year. There's other requirements as well, but the 750-hour rule is the most common rule. So if you are a qualified real estate professional, then if you take a paper loss on a property, you can also spread that across your other income. So if you have W-2 income, and we were talking earlier in boot camp, if you're a doctor, lawyer, some other person who has a high income W-2 job, and you can qualify as a real estate professional through your investing, managing, and acquisition efforts, then you can start claiming against your other assets. So a really common thing to talk to people about. And then a huge strategy in this industry is to use what's called a cost segregation study. So when you're doing a cost segregation study, you're basically wiping out the IRS's rule for that 27, averaging it out over 27 and a half years. And the company that does the study for you is actually going in and seeing what components are present in your home. And then they're accelerating that based on how much time each individual system should take to depreciate. So for example, they're going to go look at your home and they're going to say, hey, your appliances, these really depreciate over 5 years. So you got to take those all in an accelerated 5-year window. And your carpet, that's 2 years. So you can take that in an accelerated 2-year window. Your paint, 2 years, and so on and so forth. They're finding all these assets in the home and they're accelerating them faster. And then there's still the things like the wood, the nails, the plumbing pipes, things like that. Those might have a little bit longer depreciation schedule, more than 27 and a half years, because they're expected to live longer than that period. Any questions on depreciation, or is that just overheads?
Question. Now, I know can't you like front load your depreciation in terms of a write-off? Like you don't have to do it over 27 and a half years?
Yep, it's called a cost segregation study.
Okay, so
you have to have a study done?
You have to pay to get a study done?
You have to pay to get a study done. Yeah. They're getting like less and less expensive as time goes on because they're like creating formulas for like single family homes and stuff like that. And then these companies are only going in and actually inspecting them if there's an audit, because they have enough time to get through the house quickly and be like, okay, this is what we're coming back to the audit with, what we want to modify it to.
How much do those typically cost?
It's going to depend on the size of the property and the location. So it really depends. But I can tell you that compared to how much money you save on your taxes, they're basically free. I've done a lot of them, and I've done them on every single one of my properties. And I can tell you the 3 to 4 times return on investment on day one.
If you're a real estate professional, you can probably write off the cost segregation study as an expense too, right?
You also can write that off as an expense too. Exactly. Yeah.
Nice.
So yeah, like when you hear the number up front, you're like, whoa, that's expensive. But then you're like, oh, but it costs 2,000, but it saves me 40,000. Okay. That sounds like something I want to do. Okay. And then next topic is 1031 exchange. I know most people are pretty familiar with 1031 exchange. It is an IRS incentive. So the IRS wants us to be landlords. They want everybody to be landlords. They want you to provide housing. And so 1031 exchange is another one of the methods they want to incentivize you to remain a landlord, because once you become a landlord, they don't want you to get out. So in order for you to avoid paying any capital gains, you need to always sell your rental properties and buy new rental properties through 1031 exchanges. If you sell a rental property and do not buy a new rental property with a 1031 exchange, you'll owe capital gains on that capital gains tax on that sale. And you'll also have a depreciation recapture. So all that incentive that you got over that time for depreciation, all those write-offs you took, you have to pay that all back in that year. So a lot of times it can be overwhelming surprise of how much money you have to pay back. And then this is a really advanced strategy. If you don't understand 1031 exchanges yet, plug your ears and do a little song so you don't hear me. An advanced strategy is, if you do want to get out of being a landlord, the loophole is you sell property A in order to buy property B on a 1031 exchange. You rent that out for 2 years to satisfy the seasoning rules for a 1031 exchange. And then you can move into that property as your primary residence. And as long as you live in it for 2 years, then you can sell it on a 1031 exclusion, as long as with no capital gains tax, as long as your gain is less than 500,000. So that loophole is what would get you out of the cycle of being a landlord that the IRS incentivizes you to stay in. And I included right below the Section 121 exclusion. Section 120 exclusion is if you've lived in a property for 2 of the past 5 years and you're a married couple, you can sell for up to $500,000 gain tax-free. If you're single, it's just $250,000. I think that we are going to get some government intervention here soon that's going to help us get some more inventory. And I expect that government intervention to be around the Section 121 exclusion. I think we need to see that up to $1 million, at least, like on the low side, because right now people have gained more equity than that amount of time in just the past 3 to 4 years. And so people are like, I could sell and buy, but then I have to write a check to Uncle Sam for $50,000, $100,000 for really no good reason, just only because inflation's gone up so much. So that's one of the big rules that they really need to change. And I saw Austin motioning lifted up. So I know I'm not alone in that idea.
It still works great in like Nebraska and Oklahoma, but not in California.
Exactly. On the coasts, even anywhere coastal, it's going to be north, west coast or east coast. It's not enough. But yeah, especially Santa Cruz, Santa Clara, Monterey, Los Angeles, San Diego, it's tough.
Yeah, I have a client right now who's bought a house for $1 million, and it's 20 years ago. It's probably worth $4 million. And he's like, why? I'm going to get a huge bill. I'm going to owe them millions of dollars. So forget it.
You can't sell. Yeah.
No.
Can't sell. So yeah, that's exactly why that law has to change right there. So he's going to just die with the home, and then his kids will have to sell it when they get the step up in basis, or when one of the spouses does too. Okay, so now fix and flip investors, some key things to talk to them about. So fix and flip investors care most about after repair value, because their after repair value is going to be what they're going to sell the home for after they fix it up. And so how fix and flip investors calculate whether it's a good investment for them is that they take how they calculate what they're going to offer on a property is they'll take that ARV, they'll multiply it by, and then every investor is a little bit different on what they want their return on investment for their risk to be. Somewhat low as 70%. I've even heard as low as 65%, but that's pretty rare. And I've heard as high as 85%, but most people will be around 80% in California. And then you subtract out the estimated construction costs, and that gives you the purchase price that they're most likely willing to offer. So if you start working with fix and flip investors, you can ask them, hey, what percentage of ARV are you looking to purchase at? And if you ask them that, they're like, wow, this agent gets me. He understands what I'm looking for, and he understands what my buy box is without even having to ask me. He just asked me like one really direct question. So an example of this is if we had a property that an ARV of $1 million and a construction cost of $50,000, and we were going to use the 80% rule, we take that million, multiply it by 80, which gets us 800,000. Then we subtract 50,000. And now we have a purchase price of 750,000. So if you brought an investor a property like this, and they had told you before, hey, I want to be at 80% of ARV less my construction costs, you brought them this property for that purchase price, they should be ready to move forward. That's 750K. Any questions on that? It's a simple one once you get the terminology down.
What's the 80% number again?
So it's just an easy way for fix and flip investors to calculate what they're going to be willing to purchase, because they know if it's at that between 70 and 80%, it'll have the amount of cash on the back end to make it worth their while. So they know if they buy it in that range, they're going to have that ROI with all the real estate commissions and all those things that come out when they go to sell it. And so if you're in a higher price market, they're going to be probably more towards that 80%. And then your really low price markets, you'll probably be closer to that 70%. So Fresno, Sacramento, you guys might be 70, 75. Santa Clara, Santa Cruz, San Jose, Monterey, those guys, we're going to be closer to 80%. And then another really great fix and flip opportunity right now is around ADUs, because you can create a lot of opportunities with ADUs with cash flow that wouldn't exist normally on single family homes. And I'm going to go into what ADUs are towards the end of this presentation. And then we also in boot camp, and we're covering like single family homes are tough to make pencil out. But if you calculate it with building an ADU at the property, then they usually pencil out pretty well. So that's one of the big reasons why investors are looking at these. ADUs honestly right now are a cheat code to real estate investing. So if you're a real estate investor and you're not doing ADUs, they need to start. So it's great to ask investors like, hey, have you done an ADU yet? What's been your experience? How's the cash flow of that property now? But if you look at ADUs from a fix and flip perspective, they have a pretty unique way that they get appraised. So since the ADU law only came in 2020, there hasn't been enough ADU sales in every single area yet. So certain areas might have not had a single property sell yet that had a new build ADU at the property. So when an appraiser goes out, they're looking for like kind properties. So really if they're trying to appraise a property that has an ADU at it, they want to only appraise other properties with ADUs. But if there's none to be found that can be justified as comps, then what they're going to do is they're going to take that property and they're going to compare it to another single family home. And then they're just going to give you a flat amount of money for that ADU. So if you look here on this chart, it's a property 429 Rain Dollar. It's a single family home in Marina. It's 1,444 square feet. And then it has a 600 square foot ADU. So this middle one right here, 238 Fitzgerald, that was a like kind property. It also had an ADU here, same size and everything, 600 square foot, 2 bed, 1 bath. So they were very easy to compare to one another. But then if you look at this other property, 324 Parsons, This is a single family home because the appraiser could only find that one on Fitzgerald that actually had an ADU. So it had to start comping it to other properties that didn't have them. And so if you see here on the ADU section on the chart, what they did was they gave the ADU a overall value of only $100,000. ADUs cost more than $100,000 to build. So if you don't have enough comps in an area, you will run into appraisal issues when you're doing flips or refinances on ADUs. And I just want to make you guys aware of that. And I wanted you to understand how they appraise these specific type of properties. Any questions on that?
What does ADU stand for?
ADU stands for accessory dwelling unit.
Okay.
So if you have a single family home, ADUs were passed into legislation in 20 as a way to increase the supply of rental housing in California. And so we're going to be getting more and more of it in order to fight rising rental costs. And what it does is it overrides the zoning laws, because normally if you have a single family home, by law, by zoning laws, you can only have one family occupying, or one dwelling. It's only meant to occupy one dwelling. So if you had like a guest house, you couldn't rent that guest house separate. By law, it had to be one lease over the entire property. So ADUs override zoning laws and now effectively allow you to rent to two separate dwellings, effectively making it a duplex, even though it's still zoned a single family home. Yes, Miguel.
I may be looking at this wrong, but so I'm just trying to look at the chart and the comp that you had, or the subject property that didn't have any comparables for the ADU, and they ended up only appraising it an extra 100 instead of whatever it cost. But the properties you're comparing on the left, they did have an ADU. I'm confused how it only appraised for 20,000. Am I reading that wrong?
What are you looking at, the net adjustment right here? This 20.
Right above that.
They're saying that the ADU that was at 238 Fitzgerald, they're saying it was slightly worse than the one that was at 429 Rain Dollar. And so they're giving 429 Rain Dollar 20,000 on that particular ADU. Because it was probably the one at 238 Fitzgerald was probably like not very nice, probably a little bit older, maybe less nice materials. It's probably a garage conversion. There's probably just factors that made it not as good. Also, something just to know about appraisers is appraisers are usually trying to justify value, not establish value. So as long as they can justify a value, that's what their reports are really showing. So he's trying to make it penciled to like, hey, I want everything to be like around the same, because he's trying to justify it, establish it. Because if somebody has an offer on a property, technically that is the market value, because somebody's willing to pay that amount of money for it. So by the definition of market value, if one person's willing to pay for it, then it technically is that. Now the banks are the ones that don't want that to be the definition, because they're the ones that are caught in the wind if they fail on that.
Okay.
Does that make sense? They just gave it 20,000 just because of the condition of that other ADU.
It did make sense. I think I'll have to review it some more, but yeah, it did make sense.
Perfect. And then when we're looking at doing a fix and flips, when we're working with those investors, there's only 3 ways that typically you're gonna finance these, because if you're gonna be able to buy a fix and flip with a conventional loan, it's typically not gonna be a very good fix and flip. Now, of course, there's ample examples of ones that have worked, especially if you go like more luxury, because you can go really high end with the finishes and things like that. So if they're in a neighborhood like Pebble Beach, Cupertino, Los Gatos, any of these like really Clovis, anywhere that's like a higher price point compared to the other places in the area, that's when you can maybe get into a more of a conventional loan situation, and you can really put some beautiful upgrades in it and buy it conventional. But normally, in order to do a fix and flip, you're looking at somebody who's going to buy cash. They're going to buy with a hard money loan, or they're going to buy with a construction loan. Does anybody here know what a hard money loan is?
It's when you get a loan directly from a business, right? Like a
Yep. So it's going to be directly from like a business or another personal investor. And they're not lending to you based on your credit worthiness. They're only lending to you based on the financials of the property. And they're looking at this same formula for calculating how much they'll loan. They're looking at that same type of formula. And so if you guys have any investors that are interested in doing fix and flips, I have some amazing hard money lenders out there. So if they're looking for introductions, I have a couple of really good ones. The last is construction loans, and those are definitely the most challenging to obtain of the 3. You're mostly going to be looking at people who have cash and hard money, because the normal fix and flip investor doesn't want to have to go through the amount of work that it takes to get a construction loan, but they will do it if it has enough profit on it. All right, so now finding investment opportunities. So I alluded to this earlier in boot camp. So here's some of the best ways to find off-market opportunities as you start working with investors. Investors love talking about off-market properties. It's their favorite thing. If you can bring somebody an off-market property, you can call on any investor and they'll want to talk to you about it. Even if it's not that good of one, they'll still be interested just by it being off-market. So the best ways to find these are networking with investors and other commercial real estate agents. And when I say other commercial real estate agents, what I really mean is you want to target those real estate agents in your market that you've seen sell a lot of multifamily properties, maybe sell a lot of fixer-uppers. There's certain agents that do the majority of those type of business. And so if you can develop relationships with them, then they'll come to you first with their opportunities. An example of an agent like that in Monterey is Happers. He only sells multifamily properties. I think Kevin and I have represented like 70% of his purchases in the last 5 years. So before he lists anything, he sends Kevin and I an email and says, hey, this is coming to market in 2 weeks. You guys want to take it? You guys want to scoop it up before it hits the market? Because he knows we have investors that'll come in and be easy to work with and scoop it right up. Next is the bird dog fixer-uppers. Does anybody know what bird dogging is? All right, so bird dogging is when you're driving around and you're looking for properties that it look dilapidated, vacant, and need a lot of work. So some good signs of this are like a lot of broken up sidewalks and concrete and asphalt, grass that's overgrown, boards on the windows, chipped and dilapidated paint. These are all things that you're looking for when you're driving around. If you happen to see one, write down the address, go on Batch Leads, look up the owner's information. If it's an absentee owned out of state, you got a great one, look for their phone number on Forewarn. You have an amazing investment opportunity if you can find something like that. And then you can start sending that around to investors, and all your investors are going to be wanting to return your calls if you have something like that. Next is out-of-state landlords. And that same topic, if you have an out-of-state landlord, they're going to be more likely to be willing to part with their property. Tired landlords, so anybody who's been a landlord for more than like 30 to 40 years of a specific property. Actually, if you know they're past that 27.5, if they've owned it for more than 27.5 years, you also know that they're not getting depreciation on their home anymore. So that means they're not getting one of the biggest tax advantages of owning this rental property any longer. So it's actually in their best interest from a tax perspective to sell it and buy a new rental property. Wholesalers are a great source of off-market opportunities. I personally love calling through FRBO. I know you do too, Ethan. And then I don't know if Kevin showed you guys his Redfin trick recently, but I wanted to remind you guys of it. You can also do this on MLS, but it's just easier the way that it's really easy the way Redfin presents the information. MLS is possible, but I don't think they present it as well. So if you go on Redfin and search in a certain area, and then you sort it by price per square foot, if you get outliers that are weirdly lower than everybody else, you might have an opportunity on your hands. But if you get properties that are outliers as well about square footage, like the second one, see how 1903 21st Street has 4,200 square feet and a 307 price per square foot. The size of the home is an outlier itself. So that's why the price per square foot is going to be lower. But if you look at this first one at 1915, that 276 square feet price per square foot looks pretty good. And this one that just sold 3136 Carly looks really good because it's only 1,000 square feet at a 332 price per square foot. So I'd say that probably was a really good opportunity that somebody took advantage right there without having know the property or that specific neighborhood too well. I know that specific neighborhood, I used to live in it, but I didn't look up like what the other 1,000 square foot homes were going for though. Any questions on good ways to find off-market properties? There's gold in finding these guys. Lots of money. Investors will be knocking at your door if you get good at finding off-market properties. All right, AB 1482. Does anybody know what that is? Can you tell us about it?
It's a rent cap law for multifamily.
Exactly. It's a rent cap and just cause eviction law for all multifamily properties. So if you hear an investor complaining about what if we get rent control, or what if they're asking questions about rent control and what could happen if it's a bad idea because of the possible rent control, we already have rent control. It already exists. If it's a property with 2 or more units that's not owner occupied, then it has rent control already. And so what that looks like is the most amount that you can increase the rent each year is 5% plus CPI. And so that gets published every late August, early September for the upcoming year. And it's per county. So some counties are for the whole state, and the bigger counties each have their individual loans. So like Monterey, it runs off the state one. Santa Clara County has its own. This year, I think Monterey's is like 9.2 off the top of my head. But if you go to that link there, it'll give you, you can put in your zip code or your county, and it'll tell you what your max allowable is for that year. You also can no longer give people notices to vacate at these properties just because you feel like it. So 5 years ago, if someone just, you didn't like the way you looked at it, they looked at you, you give them a 60-day notice. Now you have to have just cause. So they have to either have a lease violation, or there has to be repairs required at the property that are affecting its habitability. These are repairs that are going to need a permit, and then also going to need to they're probably going to take you more than 30 days to complete. So the person's going to be displaced from their home for more than 30 days. So something like there's a slow leak in the wall, and it's been getting in the kitchen downstairs, and then all of a sudden, and then now you're gonna have to gut the whole kitchen. That would be a qualified habitability repair to give somebody notice. And that's a real life example from a property. Next is cost. Go ahead, Daniel.
Can you explain the CPI? What's that?
What does it stand for? It's basically inflation. Consumer Price Index is what it stands for. It's basically inflation. And so those get published per county. And then certain counties, if they don't have enough population, I think it is, they'll go off the state CPI as opposed to that individual county CPI. But the base is 5%. So even worst case scenario, you can still increase it by 5% each year, which, as long as you're keeping up with your rent increases and doing them every year, 5% is plenty. You don't need to, if you're keeping up with things, you don't need to do more than 5%.
And then single family, there's no rent control.
Correct. Single family, there's no rent control. And that, which nice transition to the next bullet point. Costa-Hawkins is a statewide law passed several years ago, or many years ago, which made it so that cities cannot have their own rent control. And so Costa-Hawkins is going to be back on the ballot in the upcoming elections. And it's going to be a really hot topic, a very hot topic, mostly because most people don't realize that we already have rent control and it doesn't really actually affect us that much. That'll be one reason why it's a hot topic. Number two is it would allow then the cities to place rent control on single family homes and build and multifamilies that were built. I think AB 1482, I want to say it's 1996. If it was built prior to, it's only buildings built prior to 1996. So it also allows cities to put rent control on the newer buildings as well. So if Costa-Hawkins is repealed, it'll really affect newer multifamilies and single family homes only, because there already is rent control for multifamilies. And then the last big hot topic that people are talking a lot about right now is rental registries. A lot of individual cities and municipalities are coming out with these. It's basically requiring every single landlord to give data about their tenants, about what that property is, how much they're renting it for, and when they did their increases and all that kind of stuff. And they're charging a fee to submit that information. It's all a money grab, in my personal opinion, and it's going to have an adverse effect to tenants, but they're making it seem like it's a problem to landlords. The burden of the administration will be on the landlords. The burden of the cost will end up on the tenants, which is how it works with most things. We got 13 minutes. Okay. All right. Marissa, you shared this earlier, and this is what prompted this slide. So Marissa and I were talking about yesterday was it's really common with these online leads to get people who become dreamers with their properties, and they start wanting to look at lots to purchase, not realizing what all good. So there's a lot of, not to say that you shouldn't ever buy land, but you should always make sure your buyers understand what they're getting themselves into if they do want to buy land and build. When these dreamers think about building, they think, hey, this is an easy way for me to get myself a property that I love for less. And unfortunately, that thinking may have been true many years ago, but with now construction costs and lumber being at the prices it is, it's no longer a fact. And it comes with a lot of complications and red tape. So first, the permit process can be very long and complex. It's not uncommon for this to be a 1 to 2 year process to obtain all the permits you need. And the things that go into it, depending on how rural the property is, you're going to have to drill out wells. You're going to have to insert septic tanks and do leach fields. You're going to have to worry about erosion of the current soil and do soil reports. You're going to make sure the property has propane. You're going to have service done. There's all these things you have to take care of before you even get to the point of, hey, now I'm going to start drawing plans for what my dream home is. This is all the stuff you have to do first to even get to that point. And so unless somebody's savvy and understands how to do it, or has a good relationship with a contractor, or is prepared for the headache they're setting themselves to endure, then it might not be a good idea for them to undertake a building process. Also, lending is very complex for this, and it becomes challenging to qualify for. It does have higher down payments, and then you a lot of times need to front the money for the construction costs, and you get reimbursed by these construction loans. So it'll be like after certain checkpoints in the process, you can request for $50,000 to get paid out on it, but that's only after you've paid your contractor, because usually your contractor is not willing to front you that money. They're also needing to get paid in order to pay their guys and pay for the supplies. So my recommendation, and this is what Marissa did yesterday with her buyers, was have them speak to both a lender and a general contractor who are very experienced in the loans and the work that takes to build new construction, and make sure they have a full understanding of what they're going to undertake before they get too far into the process. If they want, after they talk to those people and they understand what they're getting themselves into and they still want to continue on in it, then you're ready to start helping them more with this research. And my first recommendation is put the property in escrow before you even start ordering more reports and really understanding and talking to the county, all those great things. And that's exactly what Marissa did yesterday. And now all of a sudden her buyers are hot to buy in the next couple of months because they're like, oh, wow, yeah, I'm not ready to wait 2 years on all of this. I do want to move in. And that does sound like a lot of work. So I'm not sure I'm ready to do all that. So it's good to have these type of conversations, but you have to help them self-realize this, because if you just tell them it outright, they're going to think that you're just not going to bat for them, is what they're going to assume. They're going to say, hey, Miguel just wants to make the bigger commission. He doesn't want to help me achieve what I'm looking for. So that's why you want to really arm them with the correct data and information, go through the motions of helping them understand it. And then once they start to understand what it actually takes and what the actual costs are, then they're usually pretty discouraged to actually move forward with that. And then just quick overview on insurance. Don't want to spend too much time on this because it's not something that we do. The best thing you can do when somebody has insurance questions is to refer them to a great insurance broker. But just so you're aware, when you have rental properties, you do need either a traditional homeowner's policy with a fire rider, or you can transition to a landlord policy. I also always recommend people have umbrella policies as well, just as additional protection. And then they do not need workers' compensation as long as you're hiring licensed and insured contractors to work at the property. The other big question you'll get on that, in this kind of like the same liability type question, is, hey, should I form an LLC in order to buy this property? Typically for one like smaller size investment, the answer is usually no. I have a couple properties that I do own in LLCs. I wish I had never done it. It's really, it makes it more complex. It makes it challenging to refinance it, because then you have to take it out of the LLC to refinance it and then put it back in, and you could get reassessed for that. And it doesn't really provide you the amount of separation that you would hope so, because really your insurance does that. If you just have a really good umbrella policy, you don't really need that LLC that people are encouraging you to get. Now, if you're a big high net worth individual with a bigger property, that's when it might become a good idea for you, because you have a lot more at stake, and these umbrella policies might not be covering it. That's a small percentage of people, though, that applies to. And then when you're looking at insurance, there's 4 real big components that you're looking at. Number one is the replacement cost. And when people are looking at their replacement costs, really advise them on the true cost of rebuilding. A lot of discount type insurance agents will run policies at the cheapest way possible. So they'll run replacement costs of $200 per foot. You're not building for $200 per foot. You're looking at, I wouldn't accept an insurance policy for anything less than $300 a foot. And if you're in higher price areas, you're looking at more like $500 per foot. So like Clovis, Pebble Beach, Santa Clara, Granite Bay, you need higher replacement costs. And if you're in your lower areas, lower cost areas, that's when you get closer to that 300, 350 range. You also have a premise liability, and then you have a deductible associated with that. So basically any claims up to, let's say you have a $5,000 deductible, your claims will need to be up over $5,000 in order to collect, because you'll be responsible for those first $5,000. You also have personal injury, which is your trip and fall insurance. And then also, if you do have a fire at a rental property, you'll get that rental value still. So the company, your insurance company will still pay you that rental value while you're doing the work on rebuilding the property in order to rent it out again. So that's your rental value component of insurance. All right. It's 1:53, so I'm actually going to just stop there before we get into the ADUs, because I think it'll be a good place to pick up next week, actually, is just to cover the ADU only. Does anybody have any questions on all those little more complex investor topics?
When you're talking about the zone up changes, is that particularly going to be like an office building gets demolished and then they build homes on it, you think? Because office buildings are struggling.
So there was a recent law change actually in the last 4 or 5 months where you can actually convert office space to residential. I've seen a couple projects that have been done in the Bay Area. I want to say it was like San Leandro has done a couple of them already. and they look funky, really funky, because they're not built to be apartments. They're built to be office space. And so they're putting in like toilets and kitchens in these places and they still look like offices. So like I've seen people like there's one particular one that I'm thinking of that they did it to a office building and then they're trying to sell it and it's been sitting on the market forever because it just looks so funky. And they put a bunch of money into it. Now the zone ups are more like, it's more gonna be more like you have a single family home property and it's getting zoned up. So you have a zoning R1, it's gonna get zoned up to R4. On the R1, you're only allowed a single family home, no matter how big the lot is. And then if it gets zoned up to R4, depending on those cities' laws for zoning, it might allow 30 units per acre. And so if it's a half acre, then you can put in 15 units there. So you, in each area, you have designated cities or towns or neighborhoods where you're seeing this a lot. So like Monterey County, for example, Marina's doing it nonstop. Marina's like zone up, zone up. And so I don't know all the particular cities, but if you guys are seeing like multifamily construction in any of your particular cities, it's likely that area is doing zone ups. But you can also just reach out to your planning departments. And if you reach out to like your main, like any main city's planning department and ask them if they know about other areas getting zone ups, they'll usually have some good intel on that because it's something that they talk about a lot internally. That was a good question though. Yeah, zone ups are a really good opportunity. If you can get like investors that are also contractors, they love zone ups. They love them.
Do you think a brand new apartment complex that just got built has a management company already? Most likely.
They might have a relationship in the past, but no, I'd say it's the same as any other one. It could be somebody who like is used to self-managing and hasn't really thought about it yet. But most like sophisticated investors believe in using management companies because it's not the highest and best use of their time. The cost for management is pretty low in comparison to what the work is. And a good property manager can make you much more money than you would have in their absence. Love to get a copy of this video recording. Yeah, definitely. This is a good one to rewatch because it's pretty advanced topics. So it's a good one to like rewatch that part and be like, oh, let me Google a couple of those words that he said.
So what would happen if we signed up 100-unit place for management company? Like how would we get paid for that?
There's the formula that's it's based on the projected gross revenue and you get a percentage of that. So that's how it works for anything over 5 units. 5+ units works in that projected gross revenue. So it could end up being, depending on what the units are, it could end up being more than $1,000 per door, or it could work out to be less. But it's all based on that revenue for the company.
So that's a big chunk if you could pull that off.
Really big chunk. Yeah, really big chunk.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, it's great to do a mixture of both. Hey, these are my big targets. These are my little quick ones. So be working your little quick ones while you're working your big targets over time. And Kevin's really good at signing up those big ones. He just signed up a 38 unit complex in August. He'd been working with that person for 3.5 years though. And not like constantly, he wasn't talking to her a lot, but they'd had multiple conversations over that period. And then so she was finally ready. Something finally went wrong with her management company again. And so she finally called and was like, hey, I'm ready now. And she's also a big buyer. Like she'll make offers on pretty much anything that hits the market as long as she'll make the offer that makes sense to her. Even if it's a bad offer, she'll make that offer. And that's actually something that, God, I just said that because that was something I wanted to end on but I didn't get to because my slides is over these next couple of months, we are going to have a lot lower volume of sales take place because we're already in super low inventory. We have rising interest rates and just naturally per time of year, a lot of people don't move during the holidays. So don't be afraid to lowball properties. Do not be afraid. Don't talk your buyers out of making an offer because a lot of times you can make an offer on the property and you just tell that listing agent, hey, get me a counter so we can start the conversation so we can actually make something happen. Some agents will get like emotionally tied and they'll start like getting upset with you, but you just have to level them. Okay, don't treat this as like the end all be all. Treat this as an opening bid. Let's start the conversation so we can find a price that we both agree upon. And what you'll see is if they actually start having that conversation with the seller, you're going to see them jump really far down really quickly. A lot different than what that attitude the listing agent was going to give you in the beginning. Not to say all agents are like that. It's like 50-50. Some agents are like, yeah, man, I'm ready to make a deal. I've been sitting on the open houses for 6 months. And some agents will be like, no, I'm not allowing it, but it's their job. They have to by law present their offers. So if you put that offer in writing, they have to present it. So don't make your offers verbal, put them in writing, make them present it. And let's put pen to paper to see what that low point really is, not what the tough guy agent was saying it was going to be. Awesome. So I'll definitely send out this recording. I know it's more complex, but it's really good topics to start internalizing and having conversations around because investors will be very impressed with you and want to work with you exclusively if you can speak their language. Boot camp, let's take a 10-minute break. And everybody else, thanks for participating today. I'll see you guys tomorrow morning. So I'll see boot camp. I'll see you back at 2:10.